Hi, guys. Okay, we're going to talk about the civil rights that then moved into the 1960s now. It says Vietnam in here, but I'll do that next week. So we'll just talk about civil rights this week. So going into the 1960s, civil rights were really starting to take a head. You had a ton of groups that were trying to go through and do this peaceful protest against what was going on. And so you had the organization of several different groups. One was the NAACP, or the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. They were working for equality for everybody, not just Blacks. Sometimes people assume that the NAACP is just working for African Americans, and that is not true. They're trying to get equal rights for everybody. You had the SCLC, a lot of these, acronyms again, Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Their biggest push was using nonviolent protests to fight for their rights, and their leader was Martin Luther King Jr. And we'll talk about Dr. King here a little bit more. Dr. King, as you guys know, was basically a minister from a small town, and he was kind of given early on the task of kind of being the leader of the civil rights movement. They wanted somebody who was educated, who could rile up a group and get people motivated and behind him, and they chose him to do so. He has earned the Nobel Peace Prize. He definitely, lived up to that task, and more so. We'll talk about him more too with his speeches and his letters that he wrote. There's very famous ones, obviously, the I Have a Dream speech, his letter from Birmingham jail when he was arrested for peaceful protesting. And unfortunately, he was assassinated in the 1960s by James Earl Ray when he was exiting his motel. And, the different methods that they use for this nonviolent protest with sit-ins. We've talked a little bit about sit-ins before, but you can see here in the picture, there's lunch counters. You had white and Black students protesting, and the people behind them would basically do whatever they wanted. They didn't get in trouble, burning them with cigarettes, dumping, as you guys can see, milkshakes or water, pop all over them. And they stood there and took it. And, it was for them, if I react, I'm just going to be behaving like you are. So, you're allowed to protest. And this was their way to not do it violently. In August of 1963, there was a massive March on Washington organized to support President Kennedy's new bill on civil rights. And 200,000 people showed up. And this is where Dr. King, delivered his famous I Have a Dream speech. I have some questions you're going to answer on that in another segment. So I usually go through here and I show you guys some clips of it, and I'll try and post those too so you guys can hear some parts of it. It's a lot longer than you think. I think it was like 30 minutes in total. But the I Have a Dream portion was kind of an off-the-cuff part. He had spoke about this previously at a different time, and another woman in the crowd say, "Tell him about your dream, Martin." And so he started going back to a previous speech he had where he had delivered this message. So the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed in 64, as you can see, not 63, because President Kennedy was assassinated in November of 63. So he did not get to fulfill that want that he had. And so this now fell on the vice president who became president, which was Lyndon Johnson. So President Johnson was the one who passed the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It banned having different voter registration for Blacks and whites. As you can see, prohibited discrimination at any kind of public accommodation, restrooms, restaurants. You could not withhold funds to any group. And if you did, then you could get those funds revoked. And then ban discrimination on hiring, well, whether it was, race, religion, or sex. And then I think this is the last one, because I have Vietnam on there after this. Another person that was well known during this time was Malcolm X. Malcolm X was also pivotal in the civil rights movement as well. A lot of people want to say Malcolm X was like the violent one and Martin Luther King was the non-violent one, but that's not really true either. Malcolm X grew up kind of rough. He was, he kind of lived on the streets and got jail or was put in jail for numerous things like theft and burglary and stuff like that. But he decided to join the Nation of Islam when he was in jail. And so he became a part of the group, the Black Muslims. And they kind of were activists and trying to get things too. But they got a bad rap, meaning like they were always violent. That wasn't always the case. But he actually left them. And when he left them, he actually got assassinated them by later on. Other groups that helped were the Black Panthers. And they too were given a bad rap.